A very good evening, Zimbabwe. You are listening to Studio 7 from the Voice of America on Friday, July 17th, 2015. And this is Live Talk. I'm Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Kip Stube.
And tonight on Studio 7 Live Talk, we are talking about the crackdown on vendors by the Harare Metropolitan Police.
To join the discussion, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077, and we'll call you back.
And as usual, Live Talk goes out to Zimbabwe on our 909 medium wave frequency and on the 4930, 5940 and 15460 kilohertz shortwave, Monday through Friday at 8:30 p.m.
On the internet, you can find us at www.voazimbabwe.com, www.voashona.com, and www.voindebele.com.
They just started to beat people randomly and confiscating their ways. They are trying to move away the people they think they are opposing ZANU-PF. It's not that they are moving people, they are moving those whom they think they oppose ZANU-PF. There is nothing at the new venue sites. There are no customers, no toilets, no sheds. So how can I go there?
Atinasipongona besiza amapolisa isifunda ukuthi ekseni kuvuke kugcwele riot saka sifaza ndi riot imelele nsiphonga suspect ukuthi soviya sifaza buya science khala babufike sona phonga fika bejamba beseqa bethatha izinto zabantu bengenisa emoteni zabo la besayidini yethu ngesikhathi sangibona bathathanga abantu bathethe izinto zabantu kuphela nxa begcine bethethe bathethe sebephambili balaba bathatha izinto zabantu
mapurisa edu ana vanhu varova mapurisa edu anga achita basa rawo pakona paFirst na Nelson Mandela ndobva atanga kupotserwa nematombo nevanhu vanga vachigunun'una nekuitwa basa nemapurisa edu ekuti vari kubvisa vanhu kuti vanhu vaende kunotengesera vanhu vanotenderwa.
Once again, thanks for joining us. And you are listening to Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about the crackdown on vendors by the Harare City Council.
The Harare Municipal Police clashed again with street vendors who were returning to their old vending sites as local authorities intensified a crackdown on illegal vendors. Council police who were traveling in 2 trucks in Harare packed with stones allegedly started throwing missiles at vendors who retaliated.
Of course, in an interview with NewZimbabwe.com, Southern African Parliamentary Support Trust Executive Director John Makamure said Africa's resources are not contributing to the development of the region as the resources were being exploited by both domestic and external investors. He added that street vending is not exclusive to Zimbabwe, but is an African problem which speaks to poor governance of resources by both domestic and external actors. Of course, that is what Mr. Makamure had to say about the problem of vending in Africa. Gibbs.
What do you think about this issue? If you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077, and we'll call you back.
Onguka hama dzadiwa nhasi tiri kuendera mberi tichita hurukuro nenyaya yekuti pangagadziriswe sei dambudziko rapinda munyika revanhu vari kutengesa mumigwagwa. Vamwe vari kuti vanhu ava havana chavari kukanganisa nekuti vari kutsvaga chouviri munyika hamuna mabasa. Vanhu vakawanda vakagumurwa mabasa nekudaro kuti vawane kurarama vanofanira kuita zvimwe zvinhu. Asi nekune rimwe divi vamwe vari kuti aiwa ngavabviswe pakati peguta vaendeswe kune dzimwe nzvimbo kuitira kuti vamwewo vari muguta vari kubhadhara mitero yavo vane mastoro imomo muguta umo vakwanisewo kuita basa nemazvo. Nekudaro tinoda kuedza kuti tionesane imi vana veZimbabwe, vanhu vacho vari kutengesa migwagwa vezvitoro, kuti dambudziko iri ringapedzwe sei pasina bata murefu bata mupfupi. Gibbs.
Iwambe mahlabezulu ngalithola njani namhlanje ke ngoLwesihlanu siyawazi ukuthi was a Friday abantu bafuna ukuya ngikhaya kodwa ke lingahambi ke ukuthi liye lala ke namhlanje sesixoxeni phela ngodaba lwalaba abathengisa esitaladini. Namhlanje ke Harare sizwile ukuthi kade kulokugijimisana okukhulu kakhulu lapho ke amapolisa lawa kade hambe ethwele isitina lamatshe bezithwele ngezimota. Kube sithi khona ngale ke abathengisayo laba kade bebahlasela ngamatshe. Kuzobuya ke koBulawayo sizwile la ukuthi uMunicipal khona ngale ukhiphe abanye abantu endaweni kade bethengisela kizo. So sifuna ukuzwa ngani ukuthi kambe udaba lolu lwaqalisa ngaphi njalo luya ngaphi. Ukuze lingene kuhlelo khona manje nasi nombolo 001 202 619 2077. Khona ngapho ke uBulawayo inkulumane enketha emagwegwe eCountry Park la khona ngapho ke hillside. Sikhuluma ke ngodaba lolu ukuthi phumana egcekeni lisitshela ukuthi owaqalisa konke khona kumbani. Inombolo lifone kanye phela 001 202 619 2077. And
I think, Gibbs, we have our three guests. First, three guests are lined up. First, we have Dr. Godfrey Kanyenze, an economist with the Labour and Economic Development Research Institute of Zimbabwe. Dr. Kanyenze, good evening.
A very good evening to you.
Thank you so much.
To you, listeners.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we also have from the Employers Confederation of Zimbabwe Executive Director, Mr. John Mufukari. Mr. Mufukari, good evening.
Good evening to you and good evening, listeners.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. And last but not least, we have Councillor Peter Moyo. He's a Harare councillor. Councillor Moyo, good evening.
Good evening to you. How are you?
We are doing great, and thanks for joining us. Gibbs, you can start the ball rolling.
Now, let's start with you, Councillor Moyo, before we go to these other two gentlemen. So, at the end of the day, where is the council in terms of this vending crisis? And really, who started it?
Yeah, well, I think it's in the public domain that these vendors are in town selling their wares, not by choice, but circumstances which are beyond their control force them to be on the street. Firstly, you remember there were some very few vendors to these designated areas, but when the First Lady was meeting people all over Zimbabwe, she encouraged those who are selling whatever they are selling to continue doing so, and nobody should touch them. And the people started flocking because of the closure of companies. So many people lost their jobs. And the only alternative is to buy and sell something, irrespective of where you are selling from. Now, who started this? It was started by the government, and the government has the responsibility to put everything on place. Be it removing vendors, be it always giving them jobs, it's up to the government to know where they are going to put these people to. It's not the type of responsibility because this is beyond our control. Now, the person who is doing this, it was started by the Minister of Local Government, which gave an ultimatum to vendors to move out of the street. And therefore, they want the council to take charge by removing people on the street. But look, the council has not yet made any resolution to say people should move out of the street. People who are doing it is the Minister of Local Government. Whether they are using ZRP or they are using the National Army in the council uniforms or they are using the council officials and employees, we don't even know as councillors.
So thank you very much and stay on the line. Yeah. Let's go to Dr. Kanyenze. Dr. Kanyenze, there is a crisis here. What is causing this?
Well, it's a very simple issue. It has nothing to do with vending and vendors. It has to do with policy inconsistencies. Because what really happened is that when the First Lady was doing those rallies, she's the one who opened the whole can of worms by encouraging vendors to sell wherever they wanted. So she did two things, which are unfortunate and they've created this crisis. The first thing is that she told the police not to interfere with the women that are selling wares and to allow them to sell wherever they wanted. So in other words, it actually rendered the law enforcement ineffective in the sense that they no longer, have the power to do what they are supposed to do. So in essence, even those people that were not even vendors before realized that there was an opportunity. And you know what happens when there is an opportunity? Everyone now wanted to come into the first street to sell. And then the deluge now, this is the crisis. When now there was this deluge of people that descended onto the city centers, wherever, whether it's Mutare, Harare, Bulawayo, all over, it became a national ISO, simply because people were responding to the very fact that the highest level had given them the go-ahead to do whatever they wanted and sell wherever they wanted. So now, as a result of that announcement, and the deluge now of the people that were on the streets, it became an ISO. It became so obvious to everybody that a person had issued a directive when in fact they were not the authority to do what they'd done. So now, in Shona, we say, Nyoka Urua, Zirumi, So in essence, that's where the problem lies. Now we are now blaming the vendors, we are blaming the councillors, we are blaming everyone else. And yet, actually, it is a man-made problem. It is a crisis that was created deliberately, which weakened now the law enforcement authorities. The local councillors, the local authorities could not do anything but watch, because the directive had been issued at the very highest level. So I think this is the source of the problem.
Thank you, Gibbs.
Mr. Mfukari, can you trace to the source of the problem to the level where these two gentlemen are saying, actually pointing to the government? Is that the case, or maybe there's something else?
Well, it is very clear that the economy is not performing. And when the economy is not performing, people must have alternative means of sustenance. And vending is quite clearly the easiest way of sustaining yourself, because so little is required for you to go into a vending business. However, I stand on the side of the people who pay the rent in the city and who are keeping the city going. And these are the people, we have people selling right outside their doors everything that is available inside their shops. So it was clearly a very untenable situation. And whether it was caused by government or whether it was caused by anybody else is really beside the point. The point now is the city found itself in a completely untenable situation, because formal traders were now threatening to completely abandon the city center, and well, that's too ghastly to contemplate, because then we wouldn't have had a city center at all.
Thank you so much. Gibbs.
Yes, we baba khona lapho Moyo. Nxa usubona ke Moyo, kambe udaba lolu lungalungiswa njani? Phela lapha kwefana ukuthi lihlale phezulu kwenkume phela.
Sihlezi phezulu kwenkume. Into ekhona, into elula kakhulu ukuthi abantu baphume ezitreathini. Nika ugovernment kanike abantu umsebenzi. Kuphela abakuna mtoza kuxoxanisana nabo abafana laba mama labogogo. Ngoba laba abantu bazaphuma bayozisebenzela basebenzele imuli zabo. Akuna mntu utshona exoxanisana nabo. Nitsho ungabona uhulumende exoxanisana nabantu. Ungabona uhulumende ehlala ephethe amabhato sikhaya abantu usehlulekile. Akula kwehluleka ukudlula khonapha. Endlini nxa sihlezi umfazi lendoda ungabona besilwa ingqondo sezibhilile, kukhona opheleleza ingqondo yokucabanga. Kodwa nxa bengabonisana benikana ithuba lokukhuluma, akula mfazi kumbe indoda engathaya ubatela amafutha. Lapha igovernment yiyo yakhonisa abantu kuhle yathi create umsebenzi 2.2 million. Kathesi umsebenzi wakhona loyana yi-3 million unemployment. Amakampani ayabhala every day. Amakampani are-vibrant. Imagine ukuthi ikampani njenge-cold storage, as an example. Ikampani njenge-NRZ, as an example. Surely ingavala. Ivaliswa kuyini? Even mina banganika i-railway namhla, ngingayirana sibili. Banganika ithuba ukuthi khona yeza moyo. Ngingayirana sibili ngizihlalele endlini. Even i-cold storage. politibhuru kuze kuyokusabe khuluma ipolitiki ukuthi kuligamathi lamawuziwo abakhulumi ukuthi amakhampani adlalayo la madoda kathi singakwenza njani niyadaba ngoba umnumzana vice president umnangagwa wakhuluma ukuthi khona sisemuva 20 years behind abanye abantu ngiyavumelana naye sithi ngoba sibhizi ngepolitics sisekhangeni abanye babhizi namakhompyutha abanye baqala ukugqoka amadumbu basemozambique basechimoyo yesini so
hayi siyakuzwa kakhulu-ke Baba Moyo. So what Mr. Moyo is saying is that maybe the solution to this issue is for the government to create an environment where there could be some jobs so that people can get those jobs. And he says, when you see a government terrorizing its own people, there's a problem. Because you cannot be chasing, vendors, you cannot be beating up them and doing all sorts of things. The thing is, they are concentrating too much on politics. So he believes ZANU-PF is just politicking every day.
Tisatadzokera kuna vakanyenze navamfukarira titore muteereri vahove makadi vahove
Hello.
Makadi yenyu
Ndiri makadini wenyu.
aiwa tiripo tipewo pfungwa dzenyu.
Pfungwa dzangu dziri pakuti tinoona zviri kuitika zvino ndikachechibama. Muri kundinzwa?
Tiri kukunzwa itaura yenyu.
Manga ndichiti zvakaoma kuti zvino mukaenda pagiraundi pari kunzi panofanira kuenda mavhenda. Vari kuti magiredha ari bhizi kugiredha nzvimbo idzodzo asati dzagadzirwa. Saka unosvika kuti chiruzii chinovabata kuti vadzinde vanhu mudhorobha vachitadza kutanga vagadzirira nzvimbo zvavari kugadzira dzacho dzokutevera dzonozoendesa vanhu kuti nzvimbo dzacho idzodzo unosvika kuti chiruzii. Saka zvinongoratidza kuti vanhu vagara vane hurumende ine utsinye kuvanhu. Hurumende isina basa nevanhu inova hurumende isingazivi kuti chakakosha kuti ive ichinzi hurumende vanhu. Saka ivo vanongoti as long ivo zvavo zvichifamba zvevanhu havachina basa nazvo muupenyu hwevanhu kuti vanhu varinorarama sei kana kuti vade kuona munhu achirarama havachina basa nazvo. Ivo kanzuro vamunoona iri kumhanya-mhanya iye kuti vanhu vari kutoshandiswawo ruling party yagara iripo yagara ine utsinye.
Aiwa.
Unotaura kuti zvinorwadza seri kuti nyika inotambura sezimbabwe inowanika vanhu vachiwedzera nhamo pamusoro penhamo yagara ine vanhu.
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru vahove nekupinda muchirongwa chedu.
Tinotenda nekuti vanawo tiripo.
Tinotenda zvikuru. Of course, what Mr. Hove is saying is that at the areas which council is saying it is developed, there is nothing there. They are actually in the process of constructing stores and all that thing. And he's saying this is problematic and he does not understand why council is moving the vendors out when they have not prepared anything where they are supposed to be going. Regaiti dzore vakanyenze tichibvunza kuti vakanyenze asine dambudziko rapo iri ringagadziriswa sei. Manzwa vamufukari vachitivo vemabhizimisi vari kunetsekawo nekune rimwe divi nekuti zvinhu zvavari kutengesa muzvitoro vachibhadhara vashandi vachibhadhara mitero ndo zviri kutengeswa panze pechitoro nevanhu vasiri kubhadhara mitero nevanhu vasiri kubhadhara vashandi.
Hongu ichokwadi chataurwa navamufukari asi zvazvinoratidza ndezvekuti pakapuhwa directive iyoyo yokuti vanhu vangotengese pese pese vanga dai vakatanga kutarisa kuti zvavari kutaura izvi zvingazosvike kupi. Saka iko zvino tave kumhanya-mhanya iko zvino nokuti taane dambudziko rokuti vanhu vakazara mudhorobha vakangoenda pose pose ikangova njake tsvina hapana facilities ekuti vanhu vashandisire mutaundi macho hamuna matoilets vanhu vazara iko zvino. Saka radambudziko zvinozvo radambudziko kudai saka zvakanakira ndezvekuti mavhenders vane vanhu vavo vakavamirira. Takaita musangano musi unoyu nemapazi akawanda ehurumende nemapazi anomirira mavhenders akawanda chose akarongeka chose nemakuru vemacity council vakauya zvakare kumusangano iyoyo wakaitirwa pabelgravia sports club svoti vapfuura ino zvichireva izvo kuti zvinoda kuti vanhu vataurirane ndo chokutanga ichi. Zvekuchamhanyisana hazvichaiti nokuti chokutanga kutaura kwandaita vanhu vakakokwa kunzi vaende pavanoda vaenda pavanoda hatichagona kuti titange kuvamhanyisa iko zvino titange kuita pasi nembeva negonzo kutanganisana zvakare isu takavati vaende vanotengese pose pose. Saka zvava kuda kuti titopete muswe togara navo pasi tochinyatsotaura zvakanaka kuti taakugadzira kuti muite zvinhu zvenyu zvakanaka. Zvinhu zvose zvinoda kuti zvigadzirwe zviitwe neurongwa hwakati twasa twasa. Pose pose pasi rose kune nyaya yemavhenda. Mukaenda kana kuAsia vanonyatsopuhwa misika yavo yakanaka. Munopa musi kana musi wemugovera ndichayeuka tiri kubva mukoku kupayment. Munotoenda musi wemugovera ground rebhora rose rinenge rakagadzirwa nekuti kanzo wakaisa zvinhu zvavo vakatara zvokuti vanhu vanenge vachitengesa zvinhu zvavo zvakanaka, vanhu vachingoenda vachifamba ikoko vachitenga. Saka zvinhu zvinoda kuti zvirongwe zvigadzirwe pavanofanira kunge vachitengesera. Ibasa relocal authority nehurumende kuti vagadzire kuti zvinhu zvacho pavanotengesera pacho pange pakanaka. Ndo chinhu chekutanga ichocho. Saka iko zvino panotoda kuti pave nekutaurirana kuti zvoitwa sei, voenda papi pakanyatsogadzirwa kuti zvinhu zvacho zviitwe zvakanaka. Saka ndofunga inini ndo zvinofanira kunge zvichitoitwa iko zvino kuti tichigadzirise dambudziko rauya nekuda kwedirective yakaitwa iyi.
Gibbs.
What was he saying?
Of course, he's saying that there have been meetings, there was dialogue between the council government and the vendors, and he's commending them for being highly organized. So he's saying that Zimbabwe is not the only country with vendors. He's giving examples from Bangkok and other Asian countries that it's highly organized. The only problem with Zimbabwe is that it is chaotic. You don't know what is really happening.
Ndakanaka hangu makadiko.
Aiwa tiripo tipewo pfungwa dzenyu.
Ya ndiri kuona sokuti nyaya yekudzinganisa namavhenda haina zvainotibatsira. Vanofanira kuvarega vakadaro because havana chinhu chavakanganisa. Vanoda kuraramisa mhuri dzavo, kana vakaba vangasungwa. So the only way vanogona kuita nayo inenge yakaita zvakanaka ndiyo kutengesa zvinhu zvavanenge vachiona kuti zvinogona kuraramisa mhuri dzavo. Nokuda kwokuti kana ivo paivo pachavo vanhu vari muhurumende 60 years dzavo hadzikwani. Ini kubva pandakura kusvika panapa 60 years dzavo hadzikwani. Vanenge vachingochinja from one ministry to the other, from one ministry to the other. Havadi kubva pazvigaro. Wati more munhu anenge akaretrenchiwa nekambani moda kuti ararame sei? Saka nyaya yokumhanyisa mavhenda muchiti ari kuitirei izvozvo? Izvozvo zvingavatange vagadzirisa ikonomi yenyika ndokuti zvinhu zvigoita zvinhu zvakanaka. Ukaona munhu wose akupinda mustriti achitengesa, there is something wrong somewhere somehow. Saka hurumende pachayo ngaitange yazvinhuhwidza muhapwa mayo ione kuti kochimumbeta kuti munhu wekudai chii tani kungotanga vamhanyisa vanhu.
Vatorima tanga chidamboti tikubvunzei pane vamoka vari kuti zviri kutengeswa nevamwe vacho vari kutengesa mugwagwa ndo zviri kutengeswa navanhu vemashopu vari kubhadhara vashandi, vari kubhadharawo mitero, vari kurasikirwawo nemabasa.
Vari kurasikirwawo namabasa, but mukatarisa vakuru vehurumende vandiri kutaura havana mitero yavanobhadhara kupi. Instead vana vavo vanopinda kuzvikoro zvinodhura zvekunze kwenyika, ndo vari kuramba vachida kutiomesera isisu mavhendas achona. Mavhendas achona isi tisina kana chinhu. Taakufananidzwa nedhongi rokuti chero dhongi richimhanya pangoro richingororwa, saka ndoda kuti rimhanye. Ndinoda kuti rimhanye sedhongi ro. Ndizvo vanogona kubvumirana nekuti ukaenda kungamoko dhongi rinorohwa chero richimhanya sei pangoro. Zvinometa kuti riri kumhanya zvakaita sei, riri kudhonza sei, asinenge singorohwa. Ndo zviri kuitwa mavhendas. Isusu tinowana mari shoma shoma, tinofanira kubhadhara mari yefizi kuchikoro kuya. Ivo vanorya vachirya zvakanaka nefrog nenaisi, vana vavo vachipinda zvikoro kunana Malaysia. Hakuna kana sendira vanobhadhara kana kuti kupi. Handitoona 6 years dzikakwana havaritai. Handitoona. So zvinoshungurudza vana veZimbabwe zvezvo kuti ko iye munoti nhasi mabvisa chobo panapa 6 years dzake dzakakwana kudhara. Mabvisa munangagwa gore rino tinotadzidza zvakawanda, zvokwadi tinotaura chokwadi. Gore rino tinotadzidza zvakawanda.
Igore redzidzi
kuitwa nehurumende yedu.
Aiwa tinotenda zvikuru Vatorima.
ndatenda hangu.
Because Mr. Torima is saying as a vendor is deeply concerned and he does not understand why the government might want to stop them from doing their business, because he's saying it's a desperate situation, and he's giving a very flowery imagery of a donkey, saying, you know, when the people, they have a tendency of whipping it, even if it's doing a good job. You know, you do all sorts of jobs, you use it to carry stuff and all that, you know, but you still whip it even if it's there's no problem at all. You know, it's doing a good job. Instead of commending it for a good job, you whip it along the way.
Mr. Mfukari, how do we fix this as a nation?
I think the best position for us to fix this is to let economy take precedence over politics. And I think the one issue that we have completely failed to do is to prioritize our economy over our politics. And we have always ended up with short-term populist measures which have always left us worse off than we were before. So this vendor issue is a typical case in point. We needed to have done things in an organized manner, like Dr. Kanyenze says, but we chose to do it in a populist manner. And now it has come back to haunt us. There is absolutely no way formal business is going to remain in the CBD when it's no longer economic for them to do so. And we will have the, as I said before, unthinkable situation where we have a CBD that is completely taken over by vendors and nobody else. So the way to go about it really is let us look at the economics of this thing. We in business were horrified when government decreed before the last election that city councils were not to be paid for services already rendered. And most city councils have not recovered from that. And we are now seeing a situation again where government orders the city council, which is already struggling to survive, to put up vending sites. Honestly, where on earth is this city council going to get that money? So we must look at an economic solution.
Yes, thank you very much, and stay on the line. Baba Moyo, sizakucela ukuthi njoba sizongazana ukuthiwa ubhizi mpitshana sikubuze ngesindebele ukuthi pho manje wona ubona zani kuzalungiswa yini khonokho?
Ya lapha akula into ezalungiswa lapha. Kade ungakhangela just as an example. Kunabantu abazithi ama-land barrels abahamba besiyayishetha ama-open spaces. Ikansi liyachiya ama-breeding space, yachiya indawo zokwakha isikolo, yachiya indawo zamakampani ukuthi kube le industry. Bayekela abantu abanye ngama-MP ruling that abafundela lungisisa imithetho. Yingo abahamba beyiveta besithi singama-land barrels bethengisela abantu abazibekelayo ngudala. Kade sibathiwa ngeke uhulumende uyakwazi ukuthi ngoba alayenza into yena leyo. Kodwa ukuthi khona babalisi nabafundi. Sethi ukwakha abantu bayanaza ukuthi ikansi afanele iyozeke izinto zonezi. Kanti yikukhusile izwe njani khona?
Awuboni-ke emoyo baba. Emoyo baba. Yes, sibongile kakhulu baba.
Of course, Dr. Kanyenze, please do stay on the line, and Mr. Mufukari and Councillor Moyo, so that we can conclude. Gibbs, do you have a caller there?
Yeah, ndomnumzana uzizethi ncube ubambe khona ngapho usemfilabusi ubambe baba.
For our radio listeners, unfortunately it ends here, but the good news is we are streaming live. So go to www.voazimbabwe.com and press on LiveTalk. This is Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Gibbs Dube saying stay tuned.
Once again, thanks for joining us. You are, for those who are just joining us, this is Studio 7 Live Talk. Of course, Gibbs, I was just looking at the messages that are coming on WhatsApp. That will be, yes, many of them. That will be reading shortly. Of course, tonight we are talking about the intensifying crackdown or clashes between vendors in Harare and the city council. Gibbs.
Yeah, kulaba sanokusikhuma lapha ke siyaqhubeka ngodaba lwabathengisa ezitaladini. Sunozwa ngani ukuthi kambe lithini? Waqalisa njani njalo kuyaphela kuzoku10. Icingweni lapha bengisakhuluma lobaba umoyo. Baba umoyo ungaphosa ke elokugcina lakho khonapho ungakazilaleli umuntu omdala. Qhubeka baba.
Hayi mina ngithanda ukubonga ngoba uhlelo lwenu lolu liyenza ukuthi khona abantu bazwisise bezizela lokho esiyabe sikukhuluma okunye kufuzela ukuthathe seriously ngoba kathesi uhulumende nxa elalele abaqalisa ukukhipha abantu abasingama-land barons nabantu ababaziyo abanye ngama-MP okufuze balungisa isikhi sethu yikho kubantu bezimbabwe ukuthi asizameni ukuthi khona sibambane siselokhu sisenza into eziyenza ukuthi khona imuli zethu zisinde. Ngiyabonga kakhulu.
Hayi sibongela kakhulu ke ungadinela kusasa siza kudinga futhi. Kulungile baba. So what Mr. Moyo is saying is that the government should actually trace these land barons, and is claiming that some ministers are part of this or some other senior government officials. So he says, according to how it is structured, land barons occupy many stalls, and they own them, and then sell them or let people pay taxes. Instead of council benefiting, the land barons are benefiting. So he says, even in the construction of houses, it's the same thing. So that corruption, he says, gnaws into the social fabric of society in Zimbabwe. So again, is okay. Umnumzana uzet ngube okhona ngale ePhilipposi. Baba zet ngube ungawutshona njani?
Ngiyashona njani Nkosi?
Hayi ngiphile kakhulu khona ngapha kunjani kokondlwayo?
Hayi kokodwa kuright, hayi indlala kuphela.
Lokho kukhona ukondla wamnyama?
Ukhona sikhona.
Okay, siyakuzwa baba. Phosela lakho ngco.
Uhlupho abantu laba abasibusayo laba sebasidelela kakhulu ngoba ungathi uyananzelela ama-operations ona la asaba khona wonke kwakuyikuthi test ukuthi thina kade abantu vele singenzani. Thina abantu yitho esizedlulekayo ngoba yitho esizihlaba ngameva. Yitho esifaka abantu ukuthi basibuse baphinde basihlukuluze sibayekele sibakhangele baze banabe bafike khatshana. So uhlupho lukithi thina abantu izakhamuzi kufanele ukuthi sibambane ngoba as long as singabambananga akula singakhuluma sithini sizakuhlala sikhuluma kuphela akula nto sizayenza.
So kodwa ubona ngizana kungenzakala khona ukuthi abantu babambane bagcine bengani bakulungisa khona.
Uhlupho ukuthi ilizwe lethu ligcwele amasela abantu abaningi bayatshontsha ngakho konoko yikho kwenza ukuthi sehluleke ukuthi sibambane.
So ke akusize kuphele phela kuyahlala kukhona.
Kuzahlala kunjalo lokho ngoba singaze sikhulume sithini ungakhangela ilizwe leli lemali enenge Nkosi but kodwa siyehluleka ukuthi khona sikwanise ukuthi khona sizimele sodwa. Le mali enenge kakhulu kulamabhoda silamabhoda amanganana le mali siyalokhu la kwakungenisa imali kodwa uzoza kuthiwa kula mali uzoza kuthi iminister ethile itshontsha imali engaka kudliwa imali engaka lapha but akula muntu obotshwayo vele lapha nje uzalusile bazidlela lokhu nxa uza kuthi abantu abangena ezitreetini bathengise khona ukuthi kwechaywa futhi abantu kuyatshengisa kungathembeki kwe-government.
So ke singathi ke ngelinye ilanga nje kungavuka kuthiwa ubaba umoyo ubaba uncube nguye sezibambile elizweni nguye phela umongameli ungaqeda ngani khona
lokho aphandle kokuthi siqede i-corruption ukuthi kuphele konke lokho.
Pho uyayiqeda njani kodwa uyayiqeda njani?
Impopha bona ababenza i-corruption nxa kade sizabona into abantu ilizwe leli vele i-management yalo isihlupha nxa ama-councillor executive eziholisa imali exorbitant kungela umuntu olandelayo ukuthi vele kakula lutho la sesibanga ukubuza nje ukuthi kona sesisesaba sihleze kwesabeni.
Kodwa baba Ncube uyababopha njani abantu laba ngoba nxa ipolisa lingahamba kumuntu wena lo liyadizwa phela. So uqalisa ngaphi la?
Yikho ke khona abo kulohlupho thina abantu into okufanele sivuke ngoba ilizwe ngelethu. Singayesaba yikho ke hayi sizahlala sinjalo.
Encube baba sibongile kakhulu ngapha kwangikhona khona.
Kakhulu mbongile lami.
Sibongile baba. So what Mr. Ncube is saying is that the problem in Zimbabwe is corruption. He says if you get rid of corruption you can go somewhere, Then I asked him a question. Police appear to be corrupt, and they always look for bribes, some of them. It is alleged, right? So he says the best thing is to arrest the police first, then you can address it. How to do that. It becomes very complicated. But he says people can actually fix this, He's very confident. Yeah.
Let's go back to Mr. Mufukari before we read our WhatsApp messages. Mr. Mufukari, have you tried to engage government about your concerns? Because from some of the retailers that we are talking to, they are saying that they are worried, especially clothes coming in, shoes, and at half price, and this is really affecting business. How are those goods coming into Zimbabwe?
It's very clear that these goods are being smuggled into the country, because we are aware that the minimum tax on a pair of shoes should be $5. And yet you can go everywhere you want in town and you get shoes selling at $1 a pair. So if these shoes have paid their taxes as they should, how then are they being sold for $1? So that is certainly happening. And as for whether we have engaged with the authorities about this thing, just 2 weeks ago there was the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, AGM and Congress, and a number of ministers were there, including Minister of Trade and Commerce. And they are all aware that this is what is happening, and this is business voice as far as what is happening is concerned.
Maybe we can bring in Dr. Kanyenze there. Dr. Kanyenze, how can local industries thrive when there are these goods that are being smuggled in and sold on the streets?
Well, they can't thrive when it's a free-for-all, as things are. And basically, the unfortunate thing is that Zimbabwe is the classic example of state capture, where political elites have captured state institutions for their own private benefits. So, for example, at the border post, nobody basically takes note of, what is coming in. There's no seriousness. Goods are smuggled. And yet the borders are porous all over the place. How can you have a country like that? Can you imagine what else could be smuggled into the country? We're just talking about, the good and positive things. There could be negative things as well that could easily be sneaked in from all over the place, cocaine and so forth. That could really, damage, our children as well. So we are very worried. We are very worried people in Zimbabwe, simply because of the failure, especially by government, to listen. The most thing that annoys me is that we've been discussing with government since 1998 as the crisis was emerging through the tripartite negotiating forum. And the government would not even listen. Zimbabweans are brilliant people. Zimbabweans, they've got ideas. Go anywhere in the country. Working in the region. Go to Namibia. Go to Lesotho. Go to Botswana. Go to South Africa. Zimbabweans are in positions of authority, and they are running those countries. But come back to Zimbabwe. The ideas are there, but they are on paper. The TNF has come up with the Kadoma Declaration, which is very clear. Mr. Mfukare will testify because he's also a member of the TNF. It's so clear. If it has to be implemented, it has addressed the key issues that have resulted in the country's risk factor in Zimbabwe. And yet, there's no one who is there to implement. And it is not in the interest of individuals to implement, because, right now, tell me, people are earning huge salaries in parastatals. People are getting huge salaries in local authorities. For what? What service are they providing? This is outright corruption. This is outright, destruction of the country. And these people now are a security risk to the country, because the parastatals have been, reduced to shells. There's no railways. There's no cold storage. There's nothing. Just look at any one of our parastatals. They are in such bad shape. And if you remember, for my generation, it's so embarrassing. because parastatals were a pride of this country. But if you look at what we've done with them, there's no more institution to talk about. So this is the most unfortunate thing about our country, that the solutions are there, Zimbabweans are brilliant, but there's nobody to run with the idea.
As my friend Mutambara would say, strategy.
Certainly. And when he talks about cost storage commission, I still remember those fine cuts that were buying from cost storage. Yeah. And then
the bonds especially, Mangina.
Yes. And there was that advert. You still remember Samson?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Now, go to CSC, you're going to see some wonders.
Those were the days. I think we are being joined by our third guest, that is Councillor James Stole from Makokoba in the city of Kings and Queens. Councillor Stole, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Good.
And Councillor Stole is in charge of, Makokoba, Thorncroft Industries and Westgate and Stilldale. And those are industrial areas, Baba Stole. Akusitshela ukuthi kambe wena nxa ukhangele ubona ngani nxa ulunguza emanda akho ngale ubese ukhangela uZulu eMakokoba ubona ngani khona ukuhluphayo kungalungiswa njani?
Okwakuqala ngithanda ukuthi ngithi mina ngazise izi abalaleli ukuthi kwenzakele ukuthi ngiphenduke nje ngivela lapha eduze nje lapha elizwe leFrancis Town nje lapha eduze leBotswana. Engibonile nje nxa ngikhangela sikhuluma nge-industry. Bengifika mina eFrancis Town isikhathi esiningi kodwa besiphelela nje khonapha eduze khona sikhathi asithenga okokudla siphenduka ngesikhathi sasobuzima. Kodwa kathethe ukuhamba kwami ngithole ithuba lokuthi ngibhode iFrancis Town yonke ekubonile kungimangalisile. I-industry yabo sibonakala iminyaka engu-5 ngendlela i-industry ekhula ngayo, iminyaka engu-5 elandelayo izabe sedlulani ubulawayo. Yikho nxa ngiqhathanisa mina ngalokho kwenzakala kithi lapha eMakokoba lapha ku-Ward 7. U-Ward 7 ule ama-industrial industrial area enkulu kakhulu, singathi ingxenye yakobulawayo. Kodwa-ke okulusizi ukuthi i-industry amakhampani amaningi okwamanje akasasebenzi. Okutsho ukuthi khona nxa engasasebenzi sokuthi ukuthi khona abantu abaningi labo sebelahlekelwe yimisebenzi. Kutsho ukuthi kabasela enye indlela abangathola khona imali yokuthi beziphilise empilweni, ukuthi bethenge ukudla, bethenge impahla, bebhadale lapho abahlala khona, bebhadale abantwana ezikoleni. Kutsho ukuthi khona impilo yabantu isiyehla iya phansi ngenxa yalobo umuntu amakhampani abantu kabasaqhatshwa.
Pho kulungiswa njani? Kulungiswa njani khonokho?
Iqiniso elikhona singakhuluma sibhoda. I-answer ekhona lapha yi-politics. Konke lokho kukhona lokho kubangelwe yini yi-politics. Iqiniso elikhona ukuthi nje labo abakhona sokufanele ukuthi khona beke bevume kungabe ngahlali bebe ngabantu abafuna ukuthi bona bebe lokhu besidla bodwa bezikhangele bona abalutshwana. Kodwa ngapha ngancane iningi labantu beZimbabwe bedubeka. Iqiniso elikhona konke lokhu kubulawa yini yi-politics. Asike sibe lokhetho ukhetho olufair. Sikaba lokhetho olufair ukuthi owinile ngabe ngumuntu owine okweqiniso. Uzathola ukuthi konke lokhu sokuzasiza-ke ukuthi wonke amakhampani lawo avalileyo bazaqala-ke ukuthi bebe le-confidence ngoba sebesikhaye ukuthi uhulumende omutsha ozangena yena lowo uzatshintsha-ke izinto, uzatshintsha-ke imithetho yaleli ilizwe ibe imithetho ekhuthaza kumbe imithetho eyenza ukuthi khona ukusebenzela eZimbabwe kube kuhle kube lula njalo.
Bonike siyakuzwa kakhulu Baba Sithole. So Mr. Sithole is saying that when he's comparing what he's seeing in Botswana, for example in Francistown with Bulawayo, he says within the next 5 years Francistown may overtake Bulawayo in terms of industrial growth. And he says Bulawayo was the hub, the industrial hub of Zimbabwe. So then at the end of the day I said, how do you fix this? So he says the best thing is free and fair elections. If you get those free and fair elections, you can have a new leader who can come out with good strategies of reviving industries.
Of course, before we go to our next caller, let's just quickly read some messages on WhatsApp. Isidore says, I think there are so many countries with vendors in their CBDs. So I think the council should just let them do their business and collect my $1.25 daily. Shop owners will have to re-strategize to remain viable. Elias says, if not dealt with, this will bring serious chaos. Joseph says they should learn to vote with their minds, not with their stomachs. Where are the millions of jobs that they promised us? And then Jerry says the government must deliver its 2013 election manifesto. This will help to end the current crisis or call for free and fair elections as soon as possible. Columbus says the only way forward is to resuscitate agriculture and the manufacturing sector by inviting investors from European countries. Chinese and Russians are daylight looters. Gibson says it is difficult, and in brackets he says, to answer what is the way forward. Tinemwe mtereri mkoma tawanda zvoushe makadi. Muruku South Africa kupi?
Ya ndiri South Africa muAlberton Johannesburg.
Kwakamirawo sei panyaya yekutengesawo zvinhu?
Kunokuteti ndinofamba nemarori vanotengesa ngirire varimo vakazara. But nyaya iri kuitika nyaya problem kwedu kuZimbabwe hakuna democracy zvinhu zvinonetsa. Kuti izvo zvanoti anzi vanhu ngavabude mavhendas ngaabude mumaguta atengesere kunze kwavanenge vachiita kutengesera. But izvo zvimukatarisa ikonomi yedu munyika muZimbabwe hazvisi kutomboita mabasa hakuna. Saka vanhu ivo vakavabudisa mumataundi vazhinji vachasapera kuita mbavha vamwe vachapedzisira kuita zvechifambi. Saka zvinonetsa Mugabe ndiye munhu atadza kutotonga nyika. Mugabe ndiye anofanira kuti anga abva iye pachigaro then vanhu vozobva mumastreet. Saka hazvibatsiri chinhu kuti tinongotongwa nemunhu ane 91 years apa izvozvo haasina kana idea nekutoita seizvozvi Grace Mugabe ndiye akataura kuti vanhu ngavapinde mumastreet achitengesa. Izvo zvaakudzokerera kuti vanhu ndizvo vanhu vari kurohwa vanhu vari kukwara. Iye Mugabe anofanira kuti ngaabve pachigaro Mugabe pache tanga then mavhenda zozobva mastreet. Ngamabasa akati achacreata 2 million dziripi hapana izvozvo vanhu vari kutambudzika. Vanhu izvozvo vakabva mumastreet vakatadza kutengesa vachararama nei vana vanoenda nei kuchikoro. Ivo vari kutaura kuti ivo vanonyazozoti vari kudziva chikuza but vanhu vari kufana kugara vari kunetseka munyika yedu.
Aiwa tinotenda zvikuru mukoma Tawanda.
Okay, God blessing
Tatenda zvikuru. Of course what Tawanda is saying is that the only solution is for a regime change. Of course, if it is to be a regime change,
fairly done.
It has to be fairly done through elections. No violence is encouraged. Here on Studio 7, I think people are free to vote in and out their governments through the ballot, not the bullet.
That's right.
That's yes. What Tawanda is, of course, saying.
Yes, so we've got some messages on Facebook, and one of the messages is from Lloyd Nyoni, who writes, we blame the government for all this that is happening in the country. Myanati Midzi says it is not only the government, but President Robert Mugabe has failed to deliver. Then I've got another message from Zimbabweans, who writes, a participatory approach to tackle various developmental ills affecting urban centers is needed. So councils should create conducive platforms for ordinary residents to participate. So ordinary residents may have rich ideas that council executives may not have. Lastly, councils should adhere to the principles of good governance, and that is transparency, accountability, fairness, and responsiveness. And then we've got King Kudzi, who writes, life is a total mess in our hometown. We need this to be fixed. Then we've got Sakile, who writes from Botswana, uhulumende we-ZANU-PF wehlulekile ukupa abantu imisebenzi njalo nguye imbangela yakho konke lokhu ukuhlupheka kwabantu. So she's blaming the government here for all the ills that are happening in Zimbabwe. Then we've got Justice, who writes, I think we should blame leaders of political parties and union leaders who want to take advantage of the plight of vendors again in order to gain political mileage. So then she's actually shifting the blame now to, some union leaders too. So let's get back to Mr. Kanyenze and Mr. Mofokare. First, I'll come to you, Mr. Kanyenze. So at the end of the day, as an economist, do you think that there's something that we can do to turn around this problem that is in Zimbabwe?
Well, certainly there is a lot that can be done. Zimbabwe is such a beautiful country with beautiful people, with brilliant ideas. The issues that we're talking about, the vendors, the informality, are issues that have been discussed in the past 2 years at the International Labour Conference. And there are ideas in terms of how to transition informality to formality. So, once we are serious as stakeholders, that is business, labor, and government, we can easily turn around this country. We have just been doing a book on lessons from developmental states. We are covering 6 countries in the book: Angola, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. And basically, we are taking lessons from what the Asian tigers did, how they turned around their countries. What they did is very basic. It's only that they implemented what they agreed. The champions at the top. We saw recently how Lee was mourned, the former president of Singapore. Because we turned around the swamp. There was nothing in Singapore. Even Malaysia, it allowed it to be independent simply because there was nothing. But in 1955, not a long time ago, but it was turned around. Countries like even China that we are talking about, that is sending all these clothes and so forth all over the world. It wasn't like that. We need China for sending, machine guns. But now, China is the most productive country in the whole world. So we can easily turn around. They started in 1978. The reforms that have resulted in the massive productivity gains that have happened in that country. So if we are serious, if we get a champion, someone who can say, we want to turn things around, we want to stop all this nonsense, we want to stop this corruption, we want to ensure that institutions stand, we want to ensure that we get all these institutions running, we want to ensure that we get a government, a cabinet that runs. Because, for example, now, if you are a minister, why are you earning a salary? When the economy is running down like this, we should be ashamed of ourselves as a country. So we need to be serious. We need serious people who take this country seriously, because it's such a beautiful country with brilliant ideas. But what we need now is take each other seriously.
Siyabonga kakhulu ke Mnumzana Kanyeze uthi abantu kumele babe serious ba abantu basebenze ijob right so uthi nxa uminister pho imali uyitholelani njoba economy ifile sesizwe ke uMnumzana uBuya Moyo ose South Africa baba Moyo ngotshona njani
Tshonile baba linjani
Ngasiphile kakhulu so akusitshele wena ungathini la
Ukukhulunywa ngani bengihamba mani ngitshona ngihamba bengitshela sokulalela mani Dube.
Oh yes khuluma namhlanje ke baba ngodaba lwama vendors abathengisa emgwaqweni lapha ukuthi pho manje ungalungiswa njani konke khonokho
ungaze ukuhamba umhlaba wonke baba abantu kwama vendors ngeke si deny that truth. It's a truth ukuthi ama vendors are there and they will remain there. But now kithi lapha eZimbabwe inkinga ekhona ukuthi uyabona ama vendors angela khadi lezanu PF ayisiwo ma vendors right. Ungabheka kahle eMbare lapha anti uyabona Dube eMbare ara. Yes, eMbare lapha ama vendors wonke lana lapha amanyanga khona uyakhumbula ukuthi kube kwaba le havoc befuna ukuthi umeya ngoba ngeopposition befuna ukwenzani ngabantu abathwathwayo bezofakwa besetshenziswa for political gains. Now after sebesetshenzisiwe so kuzezinto semthethweni sebehlukuluzwa kabaphathwe kahle laba abantu ngoba there is no normal person who can live a decent job ayitshone ethengisa amatamati emgwaqweni. Akula mfana omncane ongangami ongachiya umsebenzi ahamba ayethengisa ama-juice card lama-airtime emgwaqweni. Laba bantu bayadubeka babalekela ukutshonta babalekela ukweba bese besiya ukuthi ekela sizincede ukuthi nathi sincengise lapha sincenga abantu ngama-dollar lama-$2 lama-R1 lawo. So laba bantu ke bayanceda ngoba bavala ukuthi ilizwe lingabi levavo, ilizwe lingabi le-crisis yokuthi kube lisindo abantu bexabana le-government. So I think the government should recognize ukuthi time has come ukuthi babonke ama-vendors are very important people to drive this economy. But now, unfortunately, in Zimbabwe, we don't have a government. We only have the chefs who are just milking our dying economy. So uyangisho ukuthi pho manje ama-vendors bahluphelana. Uyabona umuntu osuthayo bamzwisisa umuntu olambe. Inkinga esilayo nje eZimbabwe kuphela kwamanje.
Siyakuzwa kakhulu-ke baba Moyo, ungadinelwa kusasa mnumzane.
Yebo, libophangisa ukumfonela dube nyabe sengihamba masokunje so.
Hayi sizwile baba, senza njalo, sibongile kakhulu.
Yabonga Nkosi.
Yes, according to Mr. Moyo, you know, he says, at the end of the day, it's all a cause that has been done by the government. He says the government should squarely be blamed for all this, because you cannot see people just selling whatever they want just for the sake of it. He says, they are doing that in order to run away from social ills. Like if you sit at home and do nothing, what's next? That kind of idle mind, So he says that's very dangerous.
Let's go back to Mr. Mufukari. Mr. Mufukari, it appears from what Dr. Kanyenze is saying, there have been a lot of talking but no action. What is happening to the tripartite negotiating forum?
The quickest answer would be to say it is a talk show. I entirely agree with Dr. Kanyenze that there has been a lot of talking and there has been virtually zero implementation of that which is talked about. We on the business side want to think that we really just need to get back to basics. You cannot spend more than you earn and hope to remain a viable enterprise. And this is what we are doing as a country very, very freely indeed. We are just spending. And we are not even spending on capital items at all. We are just spending on sheer consumption. We are paying salaries. We are buying luxury goods. We are doing this kind of things which will not bring any return going forward. So it's clear the way we are now, we cannot remain a sustainable country. We have got to go back to that situation which Honorable Chinamasa was talking about, which the Reserve Bank Governor, Dr. Mangudya, has been talking about, which is really we must simply balance our books once again. There is no other way. We have to work and then spend less than we have earned.
Like Comrade BT would say, you cannot kill a hare and feast like you have killed an elephant.
Yeah, so kunjalo ukuthi nxa ungabulala umvundla baba Sithole akumelanga udle ngazani udle indlovu kunjalo.
Sure.
Yeah, so akuvale ngamafitshane khonapho ungathini ba?
Right, engathi ukuthi mina okunye ngikufake nje egcekeni. Yebo ke singakhuluma ngomumo esikhangelane lawo kathi i-crisis yama-vendor. I think thina njengobulawayo ngeqiniso abantu laba siyabahlonipha njalo siyabazwela ngoba kayisikho ukuthi ukuhamba ezitaradini siyathengisa yikuthanda kwabo, kodwa kabasela enye indlela bekabasela i-choice ukuthi bethole ukuthi beziphilise. Yikho kuqakathekile ukuthi bahloniphe njengoba njengabantu, singabi ngabantu nje sibaxotsha phela sibagijimisa, kodwa kasibanikele lokhu esithi kuthiwe khona ngama-alternatives. Sixoxisane labo, sibonisane labo ukuthi kambe ngingasisithi siyabaphingela indawo ezokuthi bethengisela ukuze bethengise okusemthethweni, sithengisela sibanika indawo